Welcome to In Focus, Alabama. I'm Jenna Enoch. This is our new public affairs show that focuses on the issues that impact Alabamians. Well, each show will feature in-depth, balanced conversations with a diverse group of newsmakers, from government officials to community leaders and expert analysts. This week, Alabama's 48th Attorney General, Steve Marshall, is our guest. Currently in his second term, he's up against term limits. And while he cannot seek a third term this November, Marshall has his eyes set on another high-profile job. General Marshall, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Look forward to hearing more about your career and how you got here.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you were sworn in as State Attorney General back in 2017, and your prior law experience has kind of dated back for decades. And as you sort of look to the next year in this office, talk a little bit about your path and how you got here.
Yeah, I think of myself as a prosecutor. When people ask me kind of what you do for a living, that's still sort of what comes out of my mouth, because that's really how I view myself from the public lens. You know, strange path, never thought I'd be doing criminal justice work, did big law to begin with. I had my own sort of practice in a small town, loved trying cases, and ended up having to do defense work one time. Got a guy off of a charge of attempted murder and said if I ever have a chance to use my skills and talents in a different way, that's what I wanted to do. And opened up an opportunity to be able to become district attorney in a rural part of Alabama, and in some ways kind of the rest is history. But the ability to work with law enforcement and victims have really shaped much of how I view public service, and I think in many respects kind of who I am as an attorney general. And after being a DA for almost 16 and a half years, I had the opportunity to become Attorney General for Alabama. A unique circumstance that allowed that to come into play. It was not part of any kind of grand plan, but in fact, God's plan was much more than mine in that way. And look, it's been an amazing blessing to be in this role now for 9 years. Thinking when I walked in, it was more of kind of the state's top cop and maybe kind of a super DA in the sense of you can do criminal cases all over the state. But what I've learned is it's far more than that, and have been enriched what I've had an opportunity to be able to do for the people of Alabama.
Well, you've spoken a lot about putting families first. What does this mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's really looking to the needs of individuals and communities, and how do we respond to that in ways that matter to them. And look, during the last administration, you know, we sued Joe Biden a lot. Not a bad thing politically, I guess, in some respects for Alabama, but it wasn't about a political effort. It really had to do with federal overreach and what that meant into the pocketbooks of Alabamians. And we wanted to make sure that we were pushing back in ways that, number one, they didn't have authority or control, but also tangibly delivered relief to them. And so fought multiple battles around not only the pocketbooks of Alabamians, but also what I think are the principles and the values of the state, reflected in our laws, number one, that we passed and we need to defend, but also standing principally with those who embrace the freedoms that are granted to them by the Constitution, and want to make sure that we defend the ability to exercise those freedoms in our country and in our state.
Well, during your time here as AG, you've supported some big crime-fighting initiatives, which have become very important to you. Touching on a couple of them, the speedy trial legislation. What is it? How has it impacted the court system here?
Yeah, speedy trial was really a response to what we were seeing of a backlog of cases, and how do we end up getting those to be heard? Because any case that ages, if you're a prosecutor, doesn't get better, because you lose witnesses, evidence gets lost, you have people that you can't find. And so particularly around violent crime, the ability to expedite those to trial is something I think is important. Recognizing, again, it's the defendant who has the right to a speedy trial, but yet many times delay is the biggest tactic for those who don't want to be held accountable.
Well, a lot has changed since you were first sworn in, 9 years, right?
For sure, yeah.
Okay. And what would you say are two of the biggest issues that are facing the state's criminal justice system right now as you see it?
You know, one, and it sounds a little strange, is capacity. When I look at where some of the problems in cities have occurred, I think some of that is attributable to the fact that we just don't have enough law enforcement. If you look at what took place for several years in this country, derogatory comments were made about law enforcement, the profession was diminished in the eyes of many, and we saw an awful lot of police officers very frustrated by the lack of support that they were seeing by their elected officials. And that's why we've been very vocal during my tenure as Attorney General to be able to support law enforcement. They truly are my heroes for what they do. But we saw many that left the profession, or others that didn't want to enter. And so I think a little bit we have rebounded on that front. but we need to do a better job of being able to recruit really good talent that want to be able to protect and serve and see that as very much a calling. But the same is true for prosecutors. We're seeing young people that see that as initially where they want to be in the profession, but either the pay is not competitive with what they're seeing outside in the private field, or whether or not they're enticed to be able to move somewhere else. We got to make sure that not only are we bringing more prosecutors, but they're staying longer, because trials are complex. It is a skill that is developed. It's the reason why we call it practicing law.
Yep.
And we need to have the most talented lawyers defending victims' interest in law enforcement as they prosecute cases. And so I think making sure that we have a good set of prosecutors is, and the right number is critically important. So beyond capacity, I think we still are dealing with the rise of juveniles that are committing more and more violent offenses. And I think being able to target that issue is something that's also important.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you. You've been kind of outspoken about this. What do you think some of the reasons behind it that you've seen juvenile crime rise, and what do you think really can be done to curb it?
Yeah, if I had that complete answer, then we'd be doing much beyond this talk. But
Yeah.
I do think we've had a couple of things. One of the things that I think gets lost in the equation a little bit in discussion of juvenile crime is what has always been a great indicator of a young person who's on the wrong path is when we see a rise in truancy.
Okay.
And I think there was a push for a while from those that were arguing for reform to push back in allowing for our truancy laws to be enforced in a way that we had juvenile probation become engaged, we had them integrated with the family, looking for ways to solve it. But look, many of those that are committing juvenile crimes are leaving our school system way too early. And we saw a great number of success stories by making sure that we were appropriately enforcing our truancy laws, doing it in a way that provided accountability, but also targeting those that were struggling with resources in the community that could help. So I think number one, we got to refocus and be able to concentrate in that area. And number two, then we got to pull the worst of the worst offenders off the streets. And if they want to act like adults, we got to treat them like an adult. And that's why the gang bill that we were able to get through the legislature 2 years ago was critically important, because we pushed down the age for which somebody could be treated as an adult. Because what we're seeing is part of the driver, particularly in some of our larger cities, of violent crime, are very young people.
Yeah.
And if they're going to commit those type of offenses, if they're going to randomly take the lives of others, then we're going to make sure that they're held accountable for that offense.
Welcome back. We've been speaking with State Attorney General Steve Marshall about his career and his future. He was also gracious enough to show us around his office. You've also supported our nation's veterans as well. As a nation, as a state, do you think we're doing enough for those individuals?
I don't know that we can ever do enough. And I think one of the areas that's been important to me was around opioid addiction. You know, we fought the battle at the national level to bring in resources to Alabama to be able to fight overdose as well as overdose deaths that were tragically occurring in our state. And if you look at the population that as a almost per capita basis most likely to be impacted, our veterans fall into that category. And so want to make sure that they continue to receive the services they need to deal with addiction. And then a little bit of a personal issue for me, also you see our veterans dealing with a suicide risk. And we need to make sure that we have access to counseling and services for those that have served us so well, that are continuing to struggle after their military careers closed. We need to get them the services they need to deal with those issues.
You'll be leaving this office this year. What would you say have been some of your biggest challenges as the State Attorney General?
You know, challenges I think is really, initially for me, is figuring out ways that we could use the levers of power that are granted to the Attorney General and make those be tangible in the lives of people. We talked earlier about making a difference in the lives of families, but it was figuring out what issues can we embrace and be a part of. Because look, you know, we're not an incredibly large Attorney General's office at a national level, but what could we do where we had specific expertise to be able to make a difference? And so, you know, we found that, for example, on the opioid side, you know, $750 million still, you know, is math that doesn't completely make sense to me, but really is going to make a difference in the lives of others. And then we just began to weigh in the fight that we had around this country involving what does it mean to be a man and what does it mean to be a woman, whether it be girls' sports, whether it be locker rooms, whether it was gender-affirming care. And so I think the challenge for me was saying we can't be all things to all people. Let's work collaboratively with my colleagues around the country, develop expertise in certain areas, and allow everybody else to be able to benefit from that. And I never would have told you that as AG we'd want to be one of the leaders in energy policy in this country, but we have been, because we saw that again as a pocketbook issue in ways that we can make a difference.
Last question for this part. Do you think there's a memory or maybe a big accomplishment that will stand out for you when you do walk out the door?
I think the memories are the ones that are the most tangible, in the sense of it was the delivery of cookies to our front desk because of work we were doing in Montgomery around violent crime. It was the hug from a mother of a capital murder case that I tried down in Ozark, who finally got justice for her daughter after 25 years. Or it's that person that will stop me in the grocery store and say, thank you for what you're doing on X, Y, or Z. I mean, that's what I'm going to remember the most. I mean, look, I've had an opportunity to do amazing things. Never thought I'd sit in the White House in the Oval Office, right? I mean, very cool experience. But what is the driver for me and what is the reason for public service are those one-on-one interactions, or with families who said, our life is better because of what you've done. And that's why I'll leave here a little saddened when this time is over, because look, I've been blown away by the opportunity the people of Alabama give me to do this job, but also knowing that I can look back and be proud of the effort that we've made, knowing that we've kept Alabama clearly in our focus in what we've tried to do.
Do you often just sit here and look at your bookshelf? Obviously, this is a compilation of all that you've done in your life, and as the AG, it's kind of nice to look at the memories.
I think in the difficult times, it's the reminder of why you do it.
Yeah.
First of all, if you don't have the support of your family, if you're not standing up in a way that makes them proud, then you clearly don't need to be in the role. But also, look, there are difficult times and hard things that come in the role, and being grounded in why did I do this to begin with, I think is something that's critically important. And again, it always to me comes back to that personal level of the life that's affected, and are you able to do it in a way that makes a difference?
As you look to your future and just things that are up ahead, what will you carry from this position with you wherever you end up?
I think it's just the remarkable opportunity that public service affords somebody. If you're in it for the title, if you're in it for whatever perks go along with it, then you clearly are doing it for the wrong reasons. And I'll think back to the unique experiences that I've had an opportunity to be a part of, and maybe even the unique fights that the job gave me the ability to be a part of, and to know that was a special blessing given to me that just anybody else can't do. And the fact that I got to do it on behalf of the people of Alabama, what's made that special.
Will you show me your medals over here? We were walking past them earlier, but I just feel like I would love to know.
Challenge coins are something that have kind of come with me into the profession, and so this is just a sampling of some of them.
Okay.
But it's a military tradition that's ultimately grown into the law enforcement side. In fact, this is one of my own, which you get to personalize in a way. And so for me, this is my second coin, the first which had my name, but I wanted something unique to the position and chose verse Micah 6:8 that speaks to seeking justice is one of the things that, as a matter of faith, we should do, and understand the role of Attorney General, that is important. And then when I created the second coin, it was like, let's just not look at seeking justice, but what are the consequences when you do that in a positive way? And it's a verse from Proverbs that speaks to when you obtain justice, the righteous rejoice and the wicked tremble. And man, what a great job description, right? When you can accomplish that through what you're doing. But love to be able to collect ones. Of course, the biggest, the goldest, and the heaviest is from President Trump, that got from him right before the first term of office ended. But it's very much something, I don't know what my wife's going to let me do with them when I'm all said and done.
That was my next question.
Is want to display them. But it's a point of pride for every agency that's a part of that. A little bit of everybody's unique sort of mission is contained with it. But this will be something, and I think I have probably several hundred now that I'll look back on, because with a lot of these, there are stories and there are relationships that are a part of that. And again, it's one of those things that makes me smile.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Time for a quick break, but Attorney General Steve Marshall offers some advice to future crime fighters.
You don't always know what's going to happen.
Yes.
And I think many young people feel like at 22, I have to have life figured out. I got to know exactly where I'm going to be when I'm 30, when I'm 40, when I'm 50. And it just doesn't work that way. And I've really tried to encourage young people, particularly even young lawyers here, be open to the opportunities that come your way. When I look back on my career, it is going to be those relationships that will live long past my time as Attorney General, because the men and women of law enforcement are truly special to me. It will remain a passion in whatever way, whether I'm still in public service or as just a private citizen. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we support them and their families, who likewise sacrifice from this as well.
We're back now with our one-on-one interview with Attorney General Steve Marshall. So if you will indulge us, we're going to do this lightning round, which is a round of questions so people can get to know you. I'm going to try to throw some stingers at you and see if you give me some funny answers. All right, so did you always know, and you kind of talked about this earlier, that you wanted a career in criminal justice? And if you didn't, what else would you have considered? Like, is there something else you wanted to be? I wanted to be an FBI agent, actually, which is funny, but I don't know. Is there something else you wanted to be?
Oh, I was going to be the next Jack Nicklaus.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to be the pre-Tiger Woods, and it became abundantly clear that that was not going to happen. But what I really saw when I got to college is I wanted to fly jets in the Marine Corps. And apparently you need to have good depth perception to be able to do it, because I failed the eye physical on that front. But no, that was, I wanted to serve my country in that way, and saw that as what life was going to hold for me. Obviously, God had a different plan.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you used to golf. Do you still golf when you have free time, or what are some things you like to do when you're not in the office?
Golf remains something that I love doing. Is an individual sport, lots of life lessons to be learned, and it's something you can never conquer. Mm-hmm. So that's fun, but love to light a fire and throw on a piece of meat. Love to be able to cook with my family. That's something that I enjoy. And I'm an outdoors guy who's always loved exercise and competing. Okay. And so running, triathlons, those things, anything that I can get a little sweaty and a little dirty doing has always been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. If you had any advice for someone who's maybe starting out, if you think back to when you were coming out of college and out of law school, what would you say to them if you now look back at that time and when you were much younger and obviously in a different time in your life? What's some advice or some things you would tell them so they could maybe someday reach where you reached?
Well, I think you don't always know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think many young people feel like at 22, I have to have life figured out. I got to know exactly where I'm going to be when I'm 30, when I'm 40, when I'm 50. And it just doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. And I've really tried to encourage young people, particularly even young lawyers here, be open to the opportunities that come your way. Because what you saw as your plan may not at all be the direction you were going to go. I never thought I was going to be doing criminal law, never expected I was going to be in a political figure, particularly in an office like Attorney General. But yet, when I look at the sequence of events that occurred in my life, the door became opened, and it was really where there was a fire lit and a passion that I never expected to be a part of my life. And so I think I tell young people a lot of times, just breathe, embrace where you are, keep your feet on the ground, and then see ultimately kind of what you have an opportunity to be able to do and where that leads you in a way that maybe you don't expect, and be open. The other thing that I would say is sometimes you got to be willing to take a risk. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed that in fact you're going to achieve the result that you want. But one of the prayers that I have for myself almost weekly is, God, make me uncomfortable, because those are the opportunities to be able to grow. And sometimes you got to take that step when you're not, whether or not you don't know where that's going to be, as a way of being able to have the opportunities in the future.
That's really good advice. If you could invite one world leader, past or present, to chat over lunch, who would it be and why?
Oh, wow.
I know.
I've always been amazed at Ronald Reagan, I guess.
Okay.
Not too far in the distant past, in the sense that young enough to remember him, but I thought he was such a great communicator. And just when you talked to him, it felt like he knew you and that you knew him. And I was always blown away by what seemed to be a very accessible public figure in my life. And so world leader, I think he would be one. And if I can have
you can have whatever you want, yes.
was always amazed at John Adams.
Okay.
In being able to pick his brain on how did this ragtag group ultimately view the vision of who our country is, particularly as we come into the semi-quincentennial, and what it was that allowed them to create the framework for the greatest nation in the world.
Good answer. What was your very first job?
I worked in a tobacco field
Okay.
when I was 15 years old, priming tobacco and working in a tobacco warehouse. Hot work, tough work, but amazing life lessons learned from the people that were in that field with me. But yeah, in West End, North Carolina.
Wow. Okay, this is a fun question. Do you have any hidden talents?
Oh gosh. I can't sing.
You can't
I don't
sing.
have any musical ability or talents there. I think the talent is more in the skill set.
Okay.
And I think I'm an encourager as a leader of people.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's more getting the best out of people and believing in them when they don't believe in themselves. I don't view
That's a good hidden
myself
talent.
as anything other than an ordinary guy. Yeah. And in some respects, sort of growing up, I always had a little chip on the shoulder because I wasn't the biggest, strongest, or fastest, but really have this strong urge to succeed. Yeah. And so probably the skill set for me is more in the soft skills with people than it is in anything that makes a difference in the lives of others.
All right, last question. Name one thing that makes Alabama the best place to live in the nation, in your opinion.
It's people. I mean, we are a nation with folks that are incredibly generous. They're remarkably giving. They're grounded in principle and faith, and I think it's why, for me, as a guy that was born here, early years here, but we moved outside and lived around the South, Alabama always felt like home. And the decision I had to come back here for law school and to be able to stay has been reinforced by the people every day that I get a chance to meet. It's why being the Attorney General of Alabama is such a remarkable gift, because I represent the best people on earth.
General Marshall, thanks so much.
Thank you.
We've enjoyed our time at the AG's office. Thanks so much for watching In Focus Alabama. I'm Jenna Enoch. Until next time.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. To keep up with important issues impacting our communities and hear more conversations with the people who are shaping the future, subscribe to our channel. You can also download our app or find Spectrum News on your TV for balanced, in-depth political coverage and more.